3 kings in darkness lie, Guthron of Org and I, under a bleak and sunless sky, the third beneath the hill. 1. Elric, Lord of the lost and sundered Empire of Melniboné, rode like a fanged wolf from a trap all slavering madness and mirth. He rode from Nazakor, city of beggars, and there was hate in his wake, for he had been recognized as their old enemy before he could obtain the secret he had sought there. Now, they hounded him, and the grotesque little man who rode laughing at Elric's side, Moonglum the Outlander, from Elware and the unmapped east. The flames of brands devoured the velvet of the night as the yelling, ragged throng pushed their bony nags in pursuit of the pair. Starvelings and tattered jackals that they were, there was strength in their gaudy numbers, and long knives and bone bows glinted in the brand light. They were too strong for a couple of men to fight, too few to represent serious danger in a hunt. So Elric and Moonglum had chosen to leave the city without dispute, and now sped towards the full and rising moon, which stabbed its sickly beams through the darkness to show them the disturbing waters of the Valkak River, and chance of escape from the incensed mob. They had half a mind to stand and face the mob, since the Valkak was their only alternative, but they knew well what the beggars would do to them, whereas they were uncertain what would become of them once they had entered the river. The horses reached the sloping banks of the Valkak, and reared with hooves lashing. Cursing, the 2 men spurred the steeds and forced them down toward the water. Into the river the horses plunged, snorting and spluttering, into the river which led a roaring course toward the hell-spawn forest of trews which lay within the borders of Org, country of necromancy and rotting, ancient evil. Elric blew water away from his mouth and coughed. "They'll not follow us to trews, I think," he shouted at his companion. Moonglum said nothing. He only grinned, showing his white teeth and the unhidden fear in his eyes. The horses swam strongly with the current behind them. The ragged mob shrieked in frustrated bloodlust, while some of their number laughed and jeered. "Let the forest do our work for us!" Elric laughed back at them, wildly, as the horses swam on down the dark, straight river, wide and deep toward a sun-starved morning, cold and spiky with ice. Scattered, slim-peaked crags loomed on either side of the flat plain, through which the river ran swiftly. Green-tinted masses of jutting blacks and browns spread color through the rocks, and the grass was waving on the plain as if for some purpose. Through the dawnlight, the beggar crew chased along the banks, but eventually gave up on their quarry to return, shuddering, to Nazakor. When they had gone, Elric and Moonglum made their mounts swim toward the banks and climb them, stumbling to the top where the rocks and grass had already given way to sparse forest land which rose starkly on all sides, staining the earth with somber shades. The foliage waved jerkily, as if alive, sentient. It was a forest of malignantly erupting blooms, blood-colored and sickly mottled. A forest of bending, sinuously smooth trunks, black and shiny. A forest of spiked leaves, of murky purples and gleaming greens. Certainly an unhealthy place if judged only by the odor of rotting vegetation, which was almost unbearable, impinging as it did upon the fastidious nostrils of Elric and Moonglum. Moonglum wrinkled his nose and jerked his head in the direction they had come. "Back now?" he inquired. "We can avoid trews and cut swiftly across a corner of Org to be in Bakshan in just over a day. What say you, Elric?" Elric frowned. "I don't doubt they'd welcome us in Bakshan with the same warmth we received in Nazakor. They'll not have forgotten the destruction we'd wrought there, and the wealth we acquired from their merchants. No, I have a fancy to explore the forest a little. I've heard tales of Org and its unnatural forest, and should like to investigate the truth of them. My blade and sorcery will protect us, if necessary." Moonglum sighed. "Elric, this once, let us not court the danger." Elric smiled icily. His scarlet eyes blazed out of his dead white skin with peculiar intensity. "Danger? It can bring only death.
Death is not to my liking just yet. The fleshpots of Aksharn, or if you prefer, Jadmoran on the other hand.
But Elric was already urging his horse onward, heading for the forest. Moonglum sighed and followed. Soon dark blossoms hid most of the sky, which was dark enough, and they could see only a little way in all directions. The rest of the forest seemed vast and sprawling. They could sense this, though sight of most of it was lost in the depressing gloom. Moonglum recognized the forest from descriptions he had heard from mad-eyed travelers who drank purposefully in the shadows of Nazakor's taverns.
This is the Forest of Truths, sure enough,
he said to Elric.
It's told of how the doomed folk release tremendous forces upon the earth and cause terrible changes among men, beasts, and vegetation. This forest is the last they created, and the last to perish.
A child will always hate its parents at certain times, Elric said mysteriously.
Children of whom to be extremely wary, I should think,
Moonglum retorted.
Some say that when they were at the peak of their power, they had no gods to frighten them.
A daring people indeed, Elric replied with a faint smile. They have my respect. Now fear and the gods are back, and that, at least, is comforting. Moonglum puzzled over this for a short time and then eventually said nothing. He was beginning to feel uneasy. The place was full of malicious rustlings and whispers, though no living animal inhabited it. As far as they could tell, there was a discomforting absence of birds, rodents, or insects, and though they normally had no love for such creatures, they would have appreciated their company in the disconcerting forest. In a quavering voice, Moonglum began to sing a song in the hope that it would keep his spirits up and his thoughts off the lurking forest.
A grin and a word is my trade, from these my profit is made. Though my body's not tall and my courage is small, my fame will take longer to fade.
So singing, with his natural amiability returning, Moonglum rode after the man he regarded as a friend who possessed something akin to a mastery over him, though neither admitted it. Elric smiled at Moonglum's song. To sing of one's own lack of size and absence of courage is not an action designed to ward off one's enemies, Moonglum.
But this way I offer no provocation,
Moonglum replied glibly.
If I sing of my shortcomings, I'm safe. If I were to boast of my talents, then someone might consider this to be a challenge and decide to teach me a lesson.
True, Elric assented gravely, and well spoken. He began pointing at certain blossoms and leaves, remarking upon their alien tint and texture, referring to them in words which Moonglum could not understand, though he knew the words to be part of a sorcerer's vocabulary. The albino seemed to be untroubled by the fears which beset the Eastlander, but often, Moonglum knew, appearances with Elric could hide the opposite of what they indicated. They stopped for a short break while Elric sifted through some of the samples he had torn from trees and plants. He carefully placed his prizes in his belt pouch, but would say nothing of why he did so to Moonglum. Come, he said, truth's mysteries await us. But then a new voice, a woman's, said softly from the gloom.
Save the excursion for another day, strangers.
Elric reined his horse, one hand at Stormbringer's hilt. The voice had an unusual effect upon him. It had been low, deep, and had for a moment sent the pulse in his throat throbbing. Incredibly, he sensed that he was suddenly standing on one of fate's roads, but where the road would take him, he did not know. Quickly, he controlled his mind, and then his body, and looked towards the shadows from where the voice had come. You're very kind to offer us advice, madam, he said sternly. Come, show yourself and give explanation. She rode then very slowly on a black-coated gelding that pranced with power she could barely restrain. Moonglum drew an appreciative breath, for although heavy-featured, she was incredibly beautiful. Her face and bearing was patrician, her eyes grey-green, combining enigma and innocence. She was very young. For all her obvious womanhood and beauty, Moonglum aged her at 17 or little more. Elric frowned. Do you ride alone?
I do now,
she replied, trying to hide her obvious astonishment at the albino's coloring.
I need aid, protection, men who will escort me safely to Karlak. There they will be paid.
Karlach, by the Weeping Waste. It lies the other side of Ilmoria, 100 leagues away, and a week's traveling at speed. Elric did not wait for her reply to this statement. We're not hirelings, madam.
Then you are bound by the vows of chivalry, sir, and cannot refuse my request.
Elric laughed shortly. Chivalry, madam. We come not from the upstart nations of the south with their strange codes and rules of behavior. We are nobles of older stock, whose actions are governed by our own desires. You would not ask what you do if you knew our names. She wetted her full lips with her tongue and said almost timidly,
You are?
Elric of Melniboné. Madam, called Elric Womanslayer in the west, and this is Moonglum of Elware. He has no conscience.
There are legends. The white-faced reaver, the hell-driven sorcerer with a blade that drinks the souls of men.
Aye, that's true. And however magnified they are with the retelling, they cannot hint, those tales, at the darker truths which lie in their origin. Now, madam, do you still seek our aid? Elric's voice was gentle, without menace, as he saw that she was very much afraid, although she had managed to control the signs of fear, and her lips were tight with determination.
I have no choice. I am at your mercy. My father, the senior senator of Karlach, is very rich. Karlach is called the City of the Jade Towers, as you well know, and such rare jades and ambers we have. Many could be yours.
Be careful, madam, lest you anger me, warned Elric, although Moonglum's bright eyes lighted with avarice. We're not nags to be hired or goods to be bought, besides which, he smiled disdainfully, I'm from crumbling Amir, the dreaming city, from the Isle of the Dragon, hub of ancient Melniboné, and I know what beauty really is. Your baubles cannot tempt one who has looked upon the milky art of Ariok, upon the blinding iridescence that throbs from the ruby throne, of the languorous and unnameable colors in the Octurious stone of the Ring of Kings. These are more than jewels, madam. They contain the life stuff of the universe.
I apologize, Lord Elric, and to you, Sir Moonglum.
Elric laughed almost with affection. We're grim clowns, lady, but the gods of luck aided our escape from Nazakor, and we owe them a debt. We'll escort you to Karlach, City of the Jade Towers, and explore the Forest of Truths another time. Her thanks was tempered with a wary look in her eyes. And now we've made introductions, perhaps you would be good enough to give your name and tell us your story.
I am Zarazina from Karlach, a daughter of the Vaoshun, the most powerful clan in southern eastern Ilmiora. We have kinsmen in the trading cities on the coast of Picarade, and I went with 2 cousins and my uncle to visit them.
A perilous journey, Lady Zarazina.
Aye, and there are not only natural dangers, sir. 2 weeks ago we made our goodbyes and began the journey home. Safely we crossed the Straits of Vilmir, and there employed men-at-arms, forming a strong caravan to journey through Vilmir, and so to Ilmiora. We skirted Nazakor since we had heard that the City of Beggars is inhospitable to honest travelers.
Here Elric smiled. And sometimes to dishonest travelers, as we can appreciate. Again, the expression on her face showed she had some difficulty in equating his obvious good humor with his evil reputation.
Having skirted Nazakor, we came this way, and reached the borders of Org wherein, of course, Truths lies. Very warily we travelled, knowing Dark Org's reputation, along the fringes of the forest. And then we were ambushed, and our hired men-at-arms deserted us.
Ambushed, eh?
Broke in Moonglum.
By whom, madam? Did you know?
By their unsavory looks and squat shapes, they seemed natives. They fell upon the caravan, and my uncle and cousins fought bravely, but were slain. One of my cousins slapped the rump of my gelding and sent it galloping so that I could not control it. I heard terrible screams, mad, giggling shouts. When I at last brought my horse to a halt, I was lost. Later I heard you approach and waited in fear for you to pass, thinking you also were a Vorg. But when I heard your accents and some of your speech, I thought that you might help me.
And help you we shall, madam, said Moonglum, bowing gallantly from saddle. And I'm indebted to you for convincing Lord Elric here of your need. But for you, we should be deep in the Sorrel Forest by now, and experiencing strange terrors, no doubt. I offer my sorrow for your dead kinsfolk, and assure you that you will be protected from now onwards by more than swords and brave hearts. For sorcery can be called up if needs be.
Let's hope there'll be no need, frowned Elric. You talk blithely of sorcery, friend Moonglum, you who hate the art.
Moonglum grinned. I was consoling the young lady, Elric, and I've had occasion to be grateful for your horrid powers, I'll admit. Now I suggest that we make camp for the night, and so refreshed be on our way at dawn.
I'll agree to that,
said Elric, glancing almost with embarrassment at the girl. Again he felt the pulse in his throat, and this time he had more difficulty in controlling it. The girl also seemed fascinated by the albino. There was an attraction between them which might be strong enough to throw both their destinies along wildly different paths than any they had guessed. Night came again quickly, for the days were short in those parts. While Moonglum tended the fire, nervously peering around him, Zarazina, her richly embroidered cloth of gold gown shimmered in the firelight, walked gracefully to where Elric sat sorting the herbs he had collected. She glanced at him cautiously, and then seeing that he was absorbed, stared at him with open curiosity. He looked up and smiled faintly, his eyes for once unprotected, his strange face frank and pleasant.
Some of these are healing herbs, he said, and others are used in summoning spirits. Yet some give unnatural strength to the imbiber, and some turn men mad. They will be useful to me.
She sat down beside him, her thick-fingered hands pushing her black hair back. Her small breast lifted and fell rapidly.
Are you really the terrible evil bringer of the legends, Lord Elric? I find it hard to credit.
I have brought evil to many places, but usually there has already been evil to match mine. I seek no excuses, for I know what I am, and I know what I've done. I've slain malignant sorcerers and destroyed oppressors, but I've also been responsible for slaying fine men, and a woman, my cousin, whom I loved. I killed her. My sword did.
And you are master of your sword?
I often wonder. Without it, I am helpless.
He put his hand around Stormbringer's hilt.
I should be grateful to it.
Once again his red eyes seemed to become deeper, protecting some bitter emotion rooted at the core of his soul.
I'm sorry if I revived unpleasant recollection.
Do not feel sorry, Lady Zarazina. The pain is within me. You did not put it there. In fact, I'd say you relieve it greatly by your presence.
Half startled, she glanced at him and smiled.
I am no wanton, sir, but...
He got up quickly.
Moonglum, is the fire going well?
Oi, Elric, should stay in for the night. Moonglum cocked his head on one side. It was unlike Elric to make such empty queries, but Elric said nothing further, so the Eastlander shrugged, turned away to check his gear. Since he could think of little else to say, Elric turned and said quietly, urgently,
I'm a killer and a thief, not fit to...
Lord Elric, I am...
You're infatuated by a legend, that is all.
No, if you feel what I feel, then you'll know it's more.
You're young.
Old enough.
Beware. I must fulfill my destiny.
Your destiny?
It is no destiny at all, but an awful thing called doom. And I have no pity except when I see something in my own soul. Then I have pity, and I pity, and I hate to look. And this is part of the doom which drives me, not fate, nor the stars, nor men, nor demons, nor gods. Look at me, Zarazina. It is Elric, poor white chosen plaything of the gods of time. Elric of Melniboné, who causes his own gradual and terrible destruction.
It is suicide.
I drive myself to slow death, and those who go with me suffer also.
You speak falsely, Lord Elric. From guilt, madness.
Because I am guilty, lady.
And does Sir Moonglum go to doom with you?
He is unlike others. He is indestructible in his own self-assurance.
I am confident also, Lord Elric.
But your confidence is that of youth. It is different.
Need I lose it with my youth?
You have strength. You're as strong as we are, I'll grant you that.
Then be reconciled, Elric.
And he was. He seized her, kissing her with a deeper need than that of passion. For the first time, Cimmeril of Emir was forgotten as they lay down, together on the soft turf, oblivious of Moonglum, who polished away at his curved sword with wry jealousy. They all slept, and the fire waned. Elric, in his joy, had forgotten, or not heeded, that he had a watch to take, and Moonglum, who had no source of strength but himself, stayed awake for as long as he could, but sleep overcame him. In the shadows of the awful trees, figures moved with shambling caution. The misshapen men of Org began to creep inwards, towards the sleepers. Then Elric opened his eyes, aroused by instinct, stared at Zarazina's peaceful face beside him, moved his eyes without turning his head, and saw the danger. He rolled over, grasped Stormbringer, and tugged the rune blade from its sheath. The sword hummed, as if in anger at being awakened. "Moonglum, danger!" Elric bellowed in fear, for he had more to protect than his own life. The little man's head jerked up. His curved saber was already across his knees, and he jumped to his feet, ran towards Elric as the men of Org closed in. "I apologize," he said.
My fault,
And then the men of Org were at them. Elric and Moonglum stood over the girl as she came awake, saw the situation, and did not scream. Instead, she looked around for a weapon, but found none. She remained still where she was, the only thing to do. Smelling like offal, the gibbering creatures, some dozen of them, slashed at Elric and Moonglum with heavy blades like cleavers, long and dangerous. Stormbringer whined and smote through a cleaver, cut into the neck and beheaded the owner. Blood gurgled from the corpse as it slumped back across the fire. Moonglum ducked beneath a howling cleaver, lost his balance, fell, slashed at his opponent's legs, and hamstrung him, so that he collapsed shrieking. Moonglum stayed on the ground and lunged upwards, taking another in the heart. Then he sprang to his feet and stood shoulder to shoulder with Elric, while Zarazina got up behind them. "The horses!" grunted Elric. "If it's safe, try to get them." There were still 7 natives standing, and Moonglum groaned as a cleaver sliced flesh from his left arm, retaliated, pierced the man's throat, turned slightly, and sheared off another's face. They pressed forward, taking the attack to the incensed foe. His left hand covered with his own blood, Moonglum painfully pulled his long poignard from its sheath and held it with his thumb along the handle, blocked an opponent's swing, closed in, and killed him with a ripping upward thrust of the dagger, the action of which caused his wound to pound with agony. Elric held his great rune sword in both hands and swung it in a semicircle, hacking down the howling, misshapen things. Zarazina darted toward the horses, leapt on her own, and led the other 2 toward the fighting men. Elric smoked at another and got onto his saddle, thanking his own forethought to leave the equipment on the horses in case of danger. Moonglum quickly joined him, and they thundered out of the clearing. "The saddlebags!" Moonglum called in greater agony than that created by his wound. "We've left the saddlebags!"
What of it? Don't press your luck, my friend.
"But all the treasure's in them!" Elric laughed, partly in relief, partly from real humor.
We'll retrieve them, friend. Never fear.
"I know you, Elric. You've no value for the realities." But even Moonglum was laughing as they left the enraged men of Org behind them and slowed to a canter. Elric reached and hugged Zarazina. "You have the courage of your noble clan in your veins."
Thank you.
She replied, pleased with the compliment.
But we cannot match such swordsmanship as that displayed by you and Moonglum. It was fantastic.
Thank the blade, he said shortly.
No, I will thank you. I think you place too much reliance upon that hell weapon, however powerful it is.
I need it.
For what?
For my own strength, and now to give strength to you.
I am no vampire, and need no such fearful strength as that supplies.
Then be assured that I do, he told her gravely. You would not love me if the blade did not give me what I need. I am like a spineless sea thing without it.
I do not believe that, but will not dispute with you now.
They rode for a while without speaking. Later they stopped, dismounted, and Zarazina put herbs that Elric had given her upon Moonglum's wounded arm and began to bind it. Elric was thinking deeply. The forest rustled with macabre, sensuous sounds. We're in the heart of Truz, he said, and our intention to scud the forest has been forestalled. I have it in mind to call on the King of Org, and so round off our visit. Moonglum laughed. Shall we send our swords along first, and bind our own hands? His pain was already eased by the herbs, which were having quick effect. I mean it, we owe, all of us, much to the men of Org. They slew Zarazina's uncle and cousins, they wounded you, and they now have our treasure. We have many reasons for asking the king for recompense. Also, they seem stupid, and should be easy to trick. Aye, the king will pay us back for our lack of common sense by tearing our limbs off. I'm in earnest. I think we should go. I'll agree that I'd like our wealth returned to us, but we cannot risk the lady's safety, Elric.
I am to be Elric's wife, Moonglum. Therefore, if he visits the King of Org, I shall come too.
Moonglum lifted an eyebrow. A quick courtship. She speaks the truth, however. We shall all go to Org, and sorcery will protect us from the king's uncalled-for wrath. And still you wish for death and vengeance, Elric, shrugged Moonglum, mounting. Well, it's all the same to me, since your roads, whatever else, are profitable ones. You may be the Lord of Bad Luck by your own reckoning, but you bring good luck to me. I'll say that. No more courting death, but we'll have some revenge, I hope. Dawn will be with us soon, Moonglum said. The Orgian citadel lies 6 hours' ride from here by my working. South-southeast by the ancient star, if the map I memorized in Nazakor was correct. You have an instinct for direction that never fails, Moonglum. Every caravan should have a man such as you. We base an entire philosophy on the stars in Ilware. We regard them as the master plan for everything that happens on Earth. As they revolve around the planet, they see all things, past, present, and future. There are gods. Predictable gods, at least, said Elric, and then rode off towards Org with light hearts, considering the enormity of their risk.